And we are live. Back once again with Think Fitness Life podcast. This week, discussing how to shop for food. And we'll talk a little about everything from which stores to pick, nutrition labels, to labels on the front, ingredient list, and much, much more. But before we get started, we have some mental gum for you guys to chew on during the week, as well as a news article that Menchie and I would like to mention and bring up, especially given today's topic. So the mental gum for the week is without any intentional fancy way of adjusting yourself to express yourself as you are is the most important thing. I'll leave you with that. So our article for today, very topical considering we're talking about shopping for food. And the article talks about when efforts to eat clean become an unhealthy obsession. And it basically is depicting the individual that, whether it's gluten-free, dairy-free, raw food, or all organic, you get committed to clean eating, and there's a fine line between passionate about eating cleanly and obsessing over eating cleanly. A lot of the times, people unnecessarily let the way that they're trying to eat and the change they're trying to make get in the way of them living their life and enjoying the moments, so to speak. The term that clinicians and dietitians and physicians came up with is orthorexia, which is a rarely recent phenomenon. Dr. Stephen Bratman first coined the term in 1997, and many of the patients that were viewed under this heading were people who were simply just trying to eat the right foods, and then some of them would ask what to cut out, and all of a sudden they'd just be cutting out everything. And these doctors who found people like this learned to gradually adjust their approach to help it be more of a hobby and be more of something that people do as a practice and continue to improve on, rather than obsessing and rushing to get everything right in order so they can have their freedom, right? So their freedom from guilt or freedom from making the wrong choices and just getting their best possible health achieved. And I can definitely look back into the clients I've had and to my own experiences, and have seen and identified when it was unhealthy to obsess over everything, and when it was a little bit more in harmony with the way I lived. And I think a lot of times people miss the boat and end up stressing over all the little details rather than just focusing on what they can control and not trying to stress about the rest. Because it comes counterintuitive if you're literally adding stress into your system and cortisol rising and breaking down muscle but storing fat. So it's really important when you're making changes or you're continuing to look for the next adjustment for that next goal that you're trying to achieve, is to humbly make those adjustments and not obsess over it, not let it run your life, and not let it control your psyche. Would you like to say any words on it, Eric?
That's crazy. For years you've had the other side. Eating disorders, anorexia, all that. Now that I think we're entering this new era of eating with all these different styles or techniques that you're starting to see this kind of stem up, which is all this is just a behavioral pattern, very similar to OCD, I would assume. Um,
Exactly. Right. It just swings one way.
Now, does it classify certain behaviors in the article? Like, obviously, we eat pretty clean, but at what point does it say kind of determine, hey, you're now in this orthorexia definition, or you kind of fall in with that? Does it say it all?
I think so. A lot of what it references is other doctors and their practices, and the underlying problem that they agreed upon is basically when people are so focused on their proper diet, so to speak, quote air quotes there, that it starts to infringe on the quality of their life and their ability to be spontaneous or engaged with the people around them. Is diminished and takes a hit. And that's essentially an eating disorder that they're talking about, orthorexia. It has some Greek and Latin derivatives, but essentially they're calling it an eating disorder. And it just centers around people who are trying to eat cleanly and purely. And like I said, the problem comes when it overlaps over their ability
Right.
to live properly, as well as get critical nutrients from foods that they
So
cut
these
out.
people are very, 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 very strict, and sort of just they might
Yeah,
just be eating certain things, like certain foods, consistently, and
and well, you know what? And I think one example I will use, because they talk about getting proper nutrients from proper foods, is
mm,
vegans. It's well known that there are essential amino acids for um, building blocks of proteins in the body that you cannot manufacture and you cannot get outside of animal sourced protein. Um, and that's where that's just a small example of how someone's intention to eat cleanly can prevent them from getting proper nutrients or even eating what they talk about in the article or even
mm,
eating enough calories day to day. I remember I actually had a client in particular from back at Equinox who was vegetarian, and there were specific things that a normal vegetarian would eat that he did not like. So it was really hard for him to find foods that he would eat, and a lot of times he would just be a grazer. He'd eat little to nothing, and you're essentially just starving your metabolism and depleting your metabolic system from doing
mm.
its job appropriately.
I,
But yeah, because it's interesting because this is definitely one that fits right in with Think Fitness Life. It's so
yeah,
controlled at the thought process and the
and it
beliefs that
stems
a person
from I think
has.
it stems from very good intentions, but at what point does it become overboard? And you could almost break this up into like two people. You have the people who are okay, they want to be health conscious, so they're going to do everything and anything to get on this path. And then once they get on this very healthy diet path, they don't want to they're so afraid that they don't want to go back to the prior, so they're like very very strict on it. And then I think there's the other half of this, and I this could be just for me just observing, is being very compulsive of what they're eating and if they are healthy. So it's this definitely in this realm of this mindset of, is this, say I'm going to eat a steak and mashed potatoes and vegetables, is this going to be pertain to my health? And at certain points, people might get so wrapped up in the sciences and the studies that they might be like, well, this is not healthy for me. I need to just eat spinach leaves and water. And then they do that, but on the other side, they start stressing about it and they're causing themselves what you said earlier, this internal anxiety. So you have those one people that are just they're creating this internal anxiety about what to eat, when to eat, where to eat. So like you said, they're not going to go out to a social setting. They're not going to go out with their family because whatever's there is going to put them in such a stressed out state. And then there's the other group that I kind of see that they're trying to do everything healthy, but they're almost like cutting too much and just pertaining to the food part of it. So I definitely think it is something tough that I think people have to recognize when they're in this thing. We all know that healthy eating is good, and I don't want to sit here and be like, oh well, you got to have bad stuff in life so you don't develop this disorder. I don't think a lot of people are going to necessarily develop this disorder from eating healthy. Just know the signs when you're going too crazy.
I think it's
Oh yeah.
totally on like a spectrum where you might have subtle um, tendencies towards this obsession, but I think what's important to understand is the bigger picture. And right off the bat, you have to be your own advocate. You have to know your body and know what feedback signals it's trying to get you. And it's a practice. It's something that you continue to grow at and get better at doing in conjunction with professionals. But at the same time, if you have an issue, you can't just go to the doctor and say, fix me. He's going to be like, okay, well, what's going on? He needs feedback from you. He needs information from you to try to understand what's going on in your system the best of his ability. The more that you are in tune with your system and understand your feedback signals, understand what is causing issues, what is not causing issues, stuff like that, the better off you're going to be when you, I guess the best word is collaborate with another healthcare professional and get guidance. Um, but so when you have that under wraps, I think the next piece to understand is that there's an equilibrium that requires diversification, and not everything
Yes.
has to be labeled good or bad. It's all relative. And if you think of the individual who lived in a bubble all his life and never let a single toxin in, that system's weak. So that later in life, one toxin that comes in, like something like the common cold, would probably kill that individual. And um, it's like a constant yin and yang. It's like the way that nutrients and vegetables need pests to let the soil and nutrients get stronger each year, and then the pests get stronger, and then the nutrients get stronger. And they both have their role. There's no good or bad. That's totally irrelevant. It just matters, is the system at equilibrium or not? And same thing goes with your body. I mean, if you had a dinner and you're bloated, or you went to the bathroom and you're having just bad, like really bad bowel movements, whether they're painful or they're non-forming, or worst case scenario, you have blood in your stool, then you're not at equilibrium. You got to fix something. But if you ate a dinner and everything seems fine, you feel great symptomatically, you're great. The next day you have a great workout, then it's safe to say that you're probably at a healthy level of whatever you ate. And it's not to say that you have to eliminate everything all the time, or if you find an allergen that you avoided altogether. It depends what the level of allergen it is, and it depends how available it is, and whether or not you're going to try to strengthen your system to improve the way it digests something, or if you're going to avoid something altogether. And then that just comes with time, and it's a case by case scenario. But I think one of the best things we can do, segueing from this article, is help give people an idea of how to shop for themselves, and what to look out for, and what to be more aware of, and what questions to think of, and what labels to think about. And we're just going to do our part at helping people think of the bigger picture, because unfortunately we can't just trust the USDA and FDA to do their job, because a lot of politics and money is involved. And whereas 50 years ago, nutrition labeling was about informing the consumer, and nowadays it really is like a trickery, and it's about making the sale. So just want to lead off with that little tidbit. And I guess the best place to start
Some
would be
something we
grocery stores.
well we have to do
Where
it.
do you
People have
shop?
to do it every
Where
week.
do you buy?
It's an inevitable thing. So I think it doesn't wherever it is. I don't think it
Mm.
matters. There's so many different avenues. There's obviously you know you got to make the best out of a certain situation you're in, but there's so many supermarkets or grocery stores nowadays, and there's more kind of popping up left and right. Um, I don't know if you guys do. You guys have Whole Foods out there? Out
And
there?
if you're sorry, go ahead. We have Whole Food. I'm very lucky with where I'm at. I somehow landed up in Salt Lake City, and there is a very apparent awareness to the quality of food and its sourcing. And we have plenty of local farmers markets that go on seasonally. There's Sprouts, there's Natural Grocers, there's Whole Foods, and all three of those tend to source um, from local companies and other farms locally. So it's really cool. And we there's another one called Harmon's that's out here. There's another one's called Smith's. There's Walmart, and you generally want to try to get a good feel for the level to which the store cares about providing um, health conscious items. And it really does depend on your area. I mean, I can I can go to a rural area and find local farmers markets and know that I don't need to look for anything that says a label on it says organic or grass fed, because everything's going to be grass fed in that area. Everything's coming from a local farm anyway. But then you go to other areas where everything's commercialized, and it doesn't seem like there's a sense of people caring about their health in that area, because all you see is like just shitty food places all the time, and the only grocery store in the area is like a Walmart. So right off the bat, it's going to be hard to buy good quality food in that area, and you're lucky that there's even a Walmart, because at least there's an organic section at that Walmart. But I know you guys have Whole Foods. I know you guys have Star Market, Shaw's, and when I was doing my shopping there, I didn't really see much difference between kind of the Star Market and the Shaw's, but the Whole Foods is obviously a different level. And I guess when I pictured in my head, I have kind of like three levels. I have like my good, better, best options, and I always kind of can find my best option at the time, especially since right in the heart of Salt Lake. And then like I look for my good and better options. Because you don't always have the best option around. You don't always have the better option around, but sometimes you have to
And
make
that's the biggest,
a decision
especially out
based
here.
upon
Well,
what's
now they're
available.
starting to get into this
So I
this
guess that
farm raised and buying whole cattles and buying your meats from certain farms and just buying stuff differently, more local source. I think that's great to see. And I tell people in the first recommendation that usually I tell when 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 people ask is find a local farmers market. You're going to get probably the best quality from there, locally grown. It's not mass produced. You're not like taxing a lot on
yeah.
you know the world for crop production, but also like locally sourced meat. I think that's huge. Funding your local slaughterhouses or farms, that goes a long way, and you're kind of putting back in the community. But I know people don't always have that option. So I think when we're going to a grocery store, The things that we have to be very careful of is the cheap, inexpensive foods that seem to be healthy but are really not. And I know we've both seen those in grocery stores and they're kind of all over the place.
Well, it kind of wedges you into a corner when you're shopping on a budget and you feel like you can't eat healthy but shop on a budget at the same time. And it is difficult, but doing things like using farmers markets goes a long way, or looking for items that are locally sourced goes a long way, because you're not paying for travel costs. You're not paying for things to be stored, and um, you end up getting a good deal and a good bang for your buck. Um, but yeah, there's a good place to start once you've found the store you're looking for. Well, generally speaking, they say you want to stick to the perimeter because of a lot of different reasons, but the perimeter is going to be more um, fresh foods that are um, basically like produce and meats and fishes and things that don't have a shelf life that could be in a bomb shelter. It's usually a good sign because it's not packed with preservatives. And then everything down the aisle is packaged in cans or plastic or paper, and in that paper is wrapped in plastic again. And they do talk about how this stuff absorbs into the food molecularly, and even something like a Nutri-Grain bar, or a bar that's wrapped in plastic, still has some degree artificial ingredients leaching into the food, that you're better off with, in the best scenario, getting things that are getting produce. And unfortunately, it is really easy to find spinach and lettuce wrapped in plastic, and it's just the way it is. You know, Back to the farmers markets if you can, or just get local produce, just right at the right, that big bunch of spinach or a big bunch of lettuce, just throw it in your basket like that. But that's just the first place to start. The next place to start is looking at nutrition labels. I think that's a really important place to start for people, because when it comes down to comparing a product and you're looking for kind of your good, better, best scenario again, there's a lot of things going on that nutrition label that are going to help you determine what's your best option. And the first thing I think to look at, that a lot of people can get screwed on when they're comparing apples to apples, is the serving size and then the amount of servings per package. Because a lot of times people will, and I've gone shopping with clients, I've seen them do it. They'll pick up an item and be like, "Oh, look, it only got 5 grams of sugar." And I'm like, that says per serving. There's 10 servings in the whole package. You know what I mean? And it's really easy for us to eat a whole package of things rather than eat the one serving size that it says of like three bites or whatever, or 10 grams or 20 grams, whatever the serving size is. You have to multiply that by the amount per package, and that's really important to understand. So when you're looking at maybe something that you're looking to buy for dessert, or you're looking to buy milk, or something that's pre-mixed or pre-made, it's really, really important to understand the serving size, the amount per serving first, before you move on to things like the fats, the proteins, the fibers, the sugars, and the
Yeah,
carbs.
that's another one that, just like like you mentioned earlier, the FDA and USDA and all those health boards, the My Choice, the Choose My Plate, that's where they steer us wrong. And unfortunately, you really can't look at a nutrition label and trust it, because there's certain rules that they can get away with. There's gray areas that they don't have to put certain things if it's not in certain amounts on that. I think that's one of the big things that bothers me. And unfortunately, the rest of the population, the people who are not educated and not aware of that, they're just reading it saying, okay, this is 200 calories. That must be it. But when reality, it might not be. I mean, there could be some disparity between package, or 100 calories of chips might not actually be that. It could be 10% more, 10% less. And then,
There are definitely things that they can't that they can kind of mislead on. But out of fear of getting more people orthorexic, I'd
no,
rather just focus
yeah.
on the things that we can
Oh, sorry.
control
I should say,
for
I'm going to loop
our
this back.
listeners.
Oh, it's all good. I 100% know I can't just end
Sorry,
it there.
I
So
interrupted.
when you're looking at a nutrition label, the biggest thing, like Matt was saying about the sugars and stuff, is to read the ingredient list, because that so you're not most people aren't going to know
Ah, okay, okay.
what some of these ingredients. I look at some of these processed food now, and I have to go look up what some of these chemicals are, what some of these newfound additives are. But that's where you're going to see all the stuff hiding in, is in the ingredients list. So if you see something that says, all right, this is 200 calories, it's 1.5 grams of fat, 23 grams of carbohydrate, 17 grams of sugar, uh, and say 2 grams of protein. But in the ingredients, it could say something like, oh, there's partially hydrogenated oil in this, or there's sugar cane, there's sucralose, there's
Mm,
sweetener, there's artificial flavors. That's where the stuff that on the nutrition label they're not going to put in. Which and over years that really doesn't equate to stuff. But if you look at that
yeah.
stuff, and now you start to say, okay, there's more chemicals in this food than what actually it says. Because people more just look at fat, carbs, and protein, total calories. It's actually what's in the food. And I think people need to start looking at the ingredients
Yep.
list and saying,
Totally.
the less ingredients, the better. The more ingredients, the worse it's going to be for you. I mean, you look at some of these processed foods of like cookies, and there's like 50 ingredients into it. Yeah, of course, 'cause it's going to make them last 30 days.
Mhm.
So, my tip when reading the nutrition label starting off, if you want to know if it's bad for you, what do they say? Like 5 or more ingredients, probably not the best thing. Put it back. Find something with less ingredients.
The less ingredients, the better is definitely a good rule of thumb. And back to macronutrients, it is important to take note of fats, proteins, fibers, sugars, carbs. And I just want to break those down really quickly before we go back to ingredient list, because I think ingredient list is so important and there's so many nuances that go into it. But real quick, fats, looking at, are there trans fats? Are there saturated fats versus unsaturated fats? Um, and then understanding the amount of protein is really important. And
Yes.
again, fats shouldn't be looked at as bad, but trans fats definitely want to avoid. Fiber is a really important one to look for. That's what you want in your product. You want proteins, you want fats, you want fibers. Fats, depends, again, put a little asterisk there. What you want to avoid are your sugars and your carbohydrates. Ideally, something is going to be low carbohydrates, low sugar. Now, there are some issues with nutrition labels and carbohydrates and how they respond in the body, because something like a white rice or a sweet potato or a something made with cassava flour or tiger nut flour, or basically another root vegetable that they turn into a flour, all of those act as a fiber, and they work to slow down digestion so you can get good absorption of the fats and proteins that, or excuse me, get absorption of the good fats and proteins that you have consumed, and it bulks up your stool to so you have healthy stool when you pass. So again, you want to avoid sugars, avoid carbohydrates, and look closely at the fats, and you want to look for proteins and fibers. And back to ingredient list, there are a lot of no-nos that you want to avoid on the ingredient list. And what's funny is you can't just look at the front label. The front label might say, all natural or sugar-free or organic or gluten-free. And half the time, that's a red flag to look a little closer. Look at that ingredient list. If it says, sugar-free and has corn syrup in it, well, they're just splitting hairs right there. It says all natural and they have like fucking arsenic in it. That's another one that's splitting hairs. Arsenic's all natural. Everything's all natural. Gluten-free is another one because it might have gluten-free, but then have a bunch of other fake bullshit in it that's going to be just as bad in your system as gluten would be. Another one is when you look at these alternate milks that they put out, and you really have to make sure that there's no carrageenan in it. But
that's another big one. Another big additive that gets thrown into milks,
just to bulk it up, thicken it.
Yeah, but it's not good for the gut, the bacteria, and I think that's a tough thing for people to hear. But that you should be avoided. A lot of these additives should be avoided at all costs.
A lot of the no-nos will include things like corn syrup, soy lecithin, which is in a lot of things.
Yeah, it just holds. It's holds stuff together, but it's just soy based.
Yeah, and anything with wheat, any type of flour that isn't like a white rice flour or even a quinoa flour is pretty good. Like I said before, cassava flour is good. Tiger nut flour is good. Almond flour the verdict is still out because it depends whether the shell was still on the almond or not. And it just depends on the individual. I've had some people who almond flour it works perfectly for, and I've had other people that they can't touch the stuff. Me personally, I can have an okay amount of almond flour, but I just don't do it too much. But I can have tiger nut flour or cassava flour, and I have no problem digesting that stuff. Palm oil, vegetable oil are no-nos. Like I said, carrageenan's a no-no. And if you're looking for baked goods, xanthan gum is quite all right. That's going to be the only thing that you're going to find that's going to be a binder for a lot of your baking agents. Baking soda is fine. Baking powder is not fine. That it has a lot of starches in it. And xanthan gum, the reason I bring that up is because it is technically one of the major allergens. It's technically part of the nightshade family, but just see how it works in your system and see if it doesn't work, then got to go back to the drawing board and find another binder that would work for baked goods. I myself like to just make everything at home so I know what goes in things. But I understand that we got to be realistic for people to take hold of some of these changes. They're going to have to buy things because they're thinking about for their family or they're on the go. And, this is just a short list of some things that you want to avoid. High fructose corn syrup is on that list as well.
Number one up there.
What? Oh yeah, I know. Seriously, really should be. Right, corn, anything corn based, anything soy based should be avoided at all costs. Those are omega-6 fats, and they're just really damaging to the gut wall. Doctors have referred to omega-6s as razor blades to the gut wall, causing gut permeability and then causing leaky gut, which is causing a host for other issues that come on board, which is going to fire your immune system on and let other things get in and maybe bind to areas they shouldn't and create inflammation in joints that they shouldn't. So it's really important that you start to look out for these things and start to protect yourself and protect your family and protect what you're putting in your household.
And another, just on the list that I forgot to mention earlier, as the ingredients go down, that means that there's less in it. So the first ingredients on the list, that means there's more of that, most of it. And then as you get further down the ingredients, there's less of it. So if you pick up something and it says like whole wheat, high fructose corn syrup, sugar, that means the bulk of that is from that stuff. And you know, the kind of sad part about kind of being, well, kind of what you just said, is most people are trying to live healthy and they want to be healthy and they want to live a good life. You know, they're going to the grocery store thinking, okay, this food's going to be healthy for me. It's got these claims. And then reality, that stuff that's inside that grocery store is actually creating a vast amount of disease that we have systemically in our body, which is crazy. Or I shouldn't say cause, can lead towards disease and susceptibility to other things.
Well, it was Socrates who said, let food be, or Hippocrates, excuse me, said, let food be thy medicine. And it's so true because food is things that you're putting in your body, and your gut is a tube from your mouth to your anus, and it's on the outside of your body. And you're literally passing things through the outside of your body through this membrane that's looking at this object and trying to get the proper nutrients from it. And if you're putting harmful things in your system on a steady basis, rather than your body having damage done to it and having to improve itself and repair and having hormesis work for you to improve your system, you're causing damage, and you're going to lead to leaky gut. You're going to lead to arthritis. You're going to lead to inflammation in the brain, which causes Alzheimer's and dementia. You're going to cause things that can bind to your cell walls in your arteries and your heart that can cause heart disease or COPD. You can get damage done and to your gut wall and things leaking through, firing on your immune system so much that you cause what do they call it? An immunodeficiency type disease, like ulcerative colitis, aka what I got. But so when we talk about food, we're talking about it in a much stronger weight than just your everyday run-of-the-mill person talks about food. We're really talking about the nourishment or anti-nourishment that you're making your body have to either absorb or combat. And it's super important to understand that that's how it works.
And you mentioned earlier, shop around the corners. Now, I haven't been in a lot of different supermarkets, been into different ones, and they're set up a little bit differently, and everyone has their different ways of setting it up. Now, when you mention that, why is that such a big thing to shop the perimeters?
Because typically the perimeters of grocery stores is where your produce sections are, your meat sections are, and just more of your fresher produce that doesn't have as long of a shelf life versus the aisles of a grocery store, which pretty much everything is. I shouldn't even say everything. I should not use that.
Most things,
but a good majority, yes, more than half, more than probably 75% of the things in the aisles are going to contain at least one, if not two, three, or four major allergens in the body, talking about dairy, gluten, soy, excess sugar, and other artificial ingredients that the body isn't used to seeing that ends up being foreign objects and turned
And
into
that caused
blubber.
all those health
Uh,
issues that you just mentioned, which is crazy. So,
exactly.
so
Exactly.
most of the inside of a grocery store is just stuff that's going to cause that list of diseases, issues you mentioned maybe 2 minutes ago. And I think that's huge for people to understand is maybe once in a while, maybe. But for most part, you should stay out of those aisles because why even risk it? I mean, you're treating your body as if you want to be healthy, put the right medication in, fruits, vegetables, quality on meats, that stuff. Now, what I have been realizing is I think I'm not sure. I'll have to do a little more research in it, but I think they're starting to realize that hint of okay, only shop the corners kind of works. So what do some of these supermarket or companies do is they start moving their products out to the corners or bringing certain products into the center so it makes you go down certain aisles. I know that
Well, that is what.
no,
Sorry,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
that
Go ahead.
in the one I go to that the olive oils are down a certain aisle with all the breads and all the other um, dressings, condiments, all that stuff. But it's a very interesting dynamic of how they're starting to pair certain aisles. So you have on one side like okay, healthy stuff. You're a parent and you go down there. And then the other side, it's like, how do I attract your kid or an emotion to make you buy this? And I think that's where a lot of people need to be very cautious of in aware when they're shopping.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because when you said it, I can definitely visualize a lot of like little like booths that they combine a bunch of other stuff with next to like asparagus or next to um, like the fish area. And it's funny because it is like out of sight, out of mind, but because it's right there, people will grab it and it'll sell. And it makes me think of an important fact that I want to mention, which is there are literally like jobs and there are people who um, are studying how to be more effective with selling a product. So they do things like understand where your eyes look on a label first, or understand where your eyes look first when you're walking down the aisle. And then it's a bidding war for who gets the best, like the end caps of aisles. And it's just a matter of does the store care about promoting health for people and good products for people because they want to pay it forward and be thinking of their fellow community, or are they just trying to make the biggest sale and push whatever is being lobbied the most by the company to get the best position for their product? So it's important to know that like it's literally every man for himself, and there are people out there studying where human culture is going, what the normal bell curve is doing, and how can they get the majority share of their product to be sold to us. So it's just funny because it's like there's literally people working against you to try to eat healthy
Working against
and
us,
try to make the right decisions for yourself
we're gonna fight them to tell you
by making the right
yeah,
choices.
right choices, doing the opposite, and make sure that you're aware of what they're trying to do.
And I think I want to go over a few other important ones
Fire away,
in terms of meats specifically.
big one.
Grass fed doesn't mean anything anymore. Vegetarian fed doesn't mean anything.
Damn it, though.
Grass finished is what matters. Something that says no antibiotics, no hormones. That matters. Pasture raised means something, but free range doesn't mean anything. Free range just means that they have a door to the coop or the barn that is open for at least 5 minutes a day. So they have the option to
Crazy.
get to the free range. Yeah, it just, I mean, when you
Gray
look into
area.
the devil's in the
Yeah.
details. And unfortunately, you just got to look out for yourself. But vegetarian fed, the reason that doesn't mean anything is because they're still fed corn and soy and oats. We don't want that.
Yep.
We don't want to eat that. We don't want to eat meat that's eaten that. Meat that is eaten that meat becomes an omega-6 fatty acid in our system rather than a good omega-3 fat along with good proteins. The other important part that goes into the sourcing of meats and the quality of meats is you want something to come from a farm. You want an animal that lived a happy, normal life, and it's passed on through consuming by being consumed in the food chain appropriately. You don't want something you wouldn't pick up roadkill and bring it home to cook, and nor should you eat something that's being mass produced at a slaughterhouse because first of all, they all are giving each other bacteria and in their own stench and in their own feces and stuff, and they're not a good quality product. They are riddled with stress and hormones and antibiotics that now bioaccumulates in your system because you've consumed it so much. And then the way that these slaughter these animals is they all know they're getting killed, so they're all so fucking stressed out, and it's not humane, which is besides the point. It makes it a less it's worse tasting meat and it's worse for your body. So you'd much rather something that was cleanly killed and done appropriately. And when you are kind of conceptualizing this, you can think of traditional farming methods versus kind of where we are today with our mass farming monocrop society. Um, with fish, it really doesn't matter anymore wild caught or farm raised because there's a gray area. If you get something that's farm raised and a really good farm, might actually be better for you than something that's wild caught and has traces of mercury and plastics already in it. With the amount of pollution we've done with mercury in the past and the amount of pollution we've done with plastics to this day, there are traces of mercury and plastics showing up in exuberant amounts in even wild caught fish. Now, that is to say that you're still, majority speaking, you're still better off wild caught over farm raised, but it's again back down to what it is that you're getting and what the farm was that it came from and all that jazz.
Yeah. I think the fish is a big one nowadays, especially because fish is such a good source of healthy fats and protein. But it becomes a problem, like what you just said, is we're polluting the ocean so much that we're just basically destroying that kind of food source. And it's like it's not really healthy to eat at that point, especially the larger fish. The larger the fish, the more mercury it's going to have, the more plastics it's going to have, and it's just problematic. And it's sad. I mean, we're kind of doing this to ourselves.
Yeah,
But
it's
unfortunately, we can't
it's
change much of it, so we have to make good choices. And I think that's what you're saying is sometimes wild caught is very good, or smaller wild caught fish. A lot of times people say are better.
and you make a good point. And my last point that I have on my notes, um, the best example is milk and dairy products, but imported. I mean, there are chemicals that we use in our harvesting process that are banned in other countries. Not even just limited, they're banned. We have certain chemicals that are there's other chemicals, excuse me, other than ones that are just banned in other countries, but we have chemicals that don't even have regulations to the amount of level that they can use that leak into our water supply and are found in trace amounts in even bottled water. So when you're looking for products, it's sad to say, but because we've let kind of our sense for the best dollar and what's best for the company outweigh what's best for the individual or what's good for the community or the environment, um, you're when you see a product that's imported from like Sweden or Italy or France, you're there's a good chance that that's better than what you could get that's from this country, and that's sad to say, but it's true. There's just a greater understanding of the trickle down effect that happens when you mess with nature, and we haven't really caught on to really making a change in this country. But milk is such a good example because we monocropped that. There were it's less about dairy being the intruder and the allergen. It's more about a type of casein protein, and dairy is just kind of taking the heat. It's getting blamed for. It's like blaming the hot dog for what the bun's doing. And I know I've said that before, but I love that phrase.
Well, it's tough because when you tell someone, "Hey, okay, well, actually, it's this casein protein. It's a protein, right?
Oh, yep. It's
There's an
A1
enzyme.
A1 casein protein versus an
Yeah.
A2 casein protein. And
So
really,
it's
what happened was there were dairy cows, and we modified genetically to get the dairy cow we wanted that would have been easier to mass produce, and they were the A1 casein cow. A1 casein protein is a major allergen for a number of the population, a large part of the population. That when you, I mean, I've found A2 milk, and there are A2 butters, but you can get milk and butters from French or Italian cows, and for the most part, they're not intrusive and they're not an allergen for a lot of people because they're so low in either lactose or they have no A1 casein protein at all that they're not a disruptor to the gut.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because you know it's tough because people want these umbrella terms. Okay, dairy's bad, wheat is bad, but it's once you break it down, it's more certain proteins in the dairy, in the wheat that cause the issues. But I like what you said. They brought up. It's kind of like dairy just gets shot for it. Where it's like if we really dig down and understand what how we kind of decided to farm or cultivate this has affected us as humans. That's why some people can do certain dairies and other people can't. Or you might be able to do an A1 cow or a goat dairy, but you can't do or I said I should say A2, right?
A2 is
A2,
good.
but you can't
A2
do regular milk that you go buy off the shelf. And I think
Go find A2 milk. It's in Whole Foods. I challenge you to next time you make something, you might not be a milk drinker, but next time you make something and you have cream in it or it calls for milk and you usually use milk and you just bite the bullet and do it anyway, I challenge you to use the A2 milk. And yeah, one thing I want to bring up too is it seems like it comes full circle because we're talking about orthorexia, being obsessed and not knowing what to do. And like you said, people want blanket terms. People want to know what to avoid. And it's not that easy. You have to know your system and know what is working in your system and what isn't working in your system and to what degree. And I think one thought that comes to mind is also kind of what you said in the beginning as well, that it's come full circle to where people just didn't care about this stuff, and then they had really bad health issues and shit hit the fan, and they were on the side of just trying to skate on thin ice as long as they could before the ice broke. And now you're like getting the other end where people are trying to avoid any detriment or any damage whatsoever to the point where it's unhealthy. And it's just so funny because I think one kind of hypothesis I have is that, you know, there's plenty of tests for markers for when things are going haywire or when you might be on your way to something not working properly. But there's no real test for like, okay, yeah, this is a stress test, you're good. And I think that's hard for people to wrap their head around. They don't know where the the line is. They don't know where. It's like feeling out with your eyes closed. They're just looking around. They don't know where the stopping point is, where the healthy where the healthy passion turns into unhealthy obsession.
So true. And that's where we're starting to see this new issue stem. But that's why we're doing this, right? That's why we're here getting out our message of how to educate the people. And every day we're constantly doing that, whether there's new information coming out, new studies coming out. I think it's sort of our duty and our job to educate as many people as we can on stuff like this. So they're in the loop before something happens to them or one of their kids. And all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, hey, I could have told you that, but I didn't. That's my fault. So if we don't tell these people what's good, what's bad, how to decipher this stuff, I think it kind of lies on us as health professionals that we need to step up and kind of do more.
I think I don't want you to say good and bad, but the risk potential. I like hearing, but I think another important part to mention is just, we might not even be educating people, but we might be drawing awareness and opening up people's perspective and asking the questions so that people can get steered in the right direction that leads them to their greatest potential for their health and their body and their life in general. And that's really the goal here, is to just try to give you the freedom that you need or want from taking care of yourself and improving the way your body performs so it can be the best to its ability. And that's different for every individual, and that's what honestly makes our jobs fun and makes us happy about what we do every day. It makes us passionate about what we do every day. But it does make providing a podcast for people difficult, because you're trying to help everybody in every scenario, so to speak. And that's why we greatly appreciate the feedback that we do get, because it really helps us understand more about who our listeners are and what information they're finding useful and what more information they are searching for. So thank you again to those who write emails or fill out the surveys in our show notes, because it goes a long way to us feeling like we can be more effective at what we're doing here. And I guess that wraps us up this week. We're about 59 minutes in. And I hope everyone can say they found something interesting from this podcast. And we'll look forward to chatting with you guys next week.